There you go. There we go. Hi. Oh, do you have a kitty in the top? No.
I always do, because that is a bundle of love that is always walking around and always oozing love and giving love. So she always enjoys hanging around and watching these types of streams, and especially listening to David Maria, because he's a legend, right? So
amazing.
yeah, Daisy sure enjoyed it. Thank you, David. That was a wonderful presentation.
So I want everyone, I hope everyone will stay and more people will come to hear to this remarkable new friend of mine who feels like a brother. I mean, we met not that long ago, but we met under fire. Omar has this remarkable program called Watchers Talk. It's a podcast that's live on YouTube, and it goes deeply into the origins of humanity, a lot of the mind expanding opportunities for us to explore consciousness and to learn more about archaeology and where we started and how we became this and what more we can become. And so Omar, I don't have a direction at all. I can ask you questions, but you can go straight at it if you want. The thing that I love about Omar, I met him because he was doing an event for 11 days. So right now, World Unity Week is 8 days. We did, and I'm gonna say we, we did a 11-day version of this with just a few of us, right, Omar?
That was an epic conference, and I'm so glad that Dr. Joan of Angels connected us, because we really did meet under fire. 122 speakers, 11 days, and 12 hours a day, every single day. And that was quite the awareness raising event. Yeah. And since then, we've really established our friendship and really become like family, because we communicate a few times a week. And I enjoy that. And I really enjoy working with you and exchanging ideas and, just passing ideas back and forth and see what sticks and what doesn't. And, really that's how we have to move forward within our communities and within our society as a human being, because up until now, it's just been division, because, we've just coming out of the Kali Yuga, and Kali Yuga is like a very dense cycle where, just a lot of darkness, a lot of hate, a lot of war, things like that, right? So this time, now that we're transitioning into a different cycle, this is something that we need, and this is something that we should be doing, where we're working all together towards a common goal and towards unity. It's really, what it's all about, because we're trying to create this new timeline where, I'm sure people are aware of it, the Hopi talk about it, where there's going to be two timelines, and the separation of the two timelines, where one is going to be of love and, joy and abundance and empathy. And of course, the other side, we don't even want to think about that. Right. So this new timeline that we're creating, this is something that we need and love, is one of the most, fundamental ingredients for us to move forward with this. Now, I did have a presentation put together, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to complete it because I got sick. I ended up picking up the flu, and then there was some things happening within my wife's family, so I wasn't able to fully complete that. But I'm more than happy to, talk about my experiences and
Yeah.
talk about love. So, I wouldn't mind going back and forth with you, Kathy, on
Okay.
this one.
Okay. Well, first I
So,
want people to understand how remarkable you are. I mean,
thank
you, well, no, I know you, because you're not going to say anything, so I have to. Um, you grew up in Denmark. You came over, you live in Canada right now,
That's right.
and you didn't learn English in school.
I did, and I've got quite the, I would say, contract that I'm fulfilling, and I'm a believer of someone that chooses to believe that we choose our parents to whom we're going to be born to because of the genetic memories that come along with certain individuals. Now, when I incarnated onto this earth in 1975, I made a choice of two people that were completely opposite to one another and extremely incompatible. So I'm not really quite sure how they came together, but I understand that through soul contracts and through conscious contracts, that's a decision that we had made. So I was born to a father who moved to Canada from Pakistan in 1972. First, he lived in Spain, and then from Spain, he moved to Canada. And by 1974, himself and my mom, who's Aboriginal Mohawk Canadian, they got together and got married. And my mom became pregnant. And 6 months after I was born, my parents divorced. And my father actually smuggled me out of the country. And my mom, I don't know where she was, but he grabbed me from home and drove me to the Montreal airport and put me on a plane with a stewardess and sent me to Denmark, to Copenhagen, to go and live with his older brother, which would be, I guess, my aunt and uncle.
Right.
So I remained there until I was 10 years old. And I would say that that was probably the first stable environment I ever had, right? I had a home, I had cousins, which I believed actually at the time that they were my biological brother and sister. And up until 10 years old, Kathy, I actually thought that my father was actually my uncle. And that's what I was told my entire life, that my aunt and uncle that are in Denmark are actually my parents, and that my father that lives in Denmark is my uncle. So when he would come to Denmark to come and visit, it was always be like, my uncle is coming to visit me, my uncle's coming to visit me. But then, things got crazy. So at about 9 years old, being that my dad's from Pakistan, they decided to do an arranged marriage for him, his older sister. So they went out and spoke to some families and connected with my stepmom, and they came to an agreement that they were going to get married. But at first, they didn't want to marry my dad because of myself, right? Because in the culture, it was if you've been married before and if you have children, you're not a compatible partner because your first relationship didn't work out. So there's always questions to that. But they agreed to marry him. And so they got married in 1984,
Wow.
1983, 1984, just around that time. And then my aunt and uncle in Denmark at the time, they began pressuring my dad for him to bring me back to Canada and to raise me because I was his son. And it was at that time that they actually dropped this bomb on me and told me that they actually were not my real parents. And
Wow.
that was quite heartbreaking, right? And I was like, wow, this is insane. How is that not true? Because that's my brother, that's my sister, that's my brother, that's my mom, that's my dad. But it turned out not. So anyways, I was, I guess I was mentally, compromised at that time. And reluctantly, I was brought here to Canada, and I moved to Edmonton, Alberta in 1985. So when I got to Edmonton in 85, it was, pretty much right after I landed at the Edmonton International Airport. I can actually recall the day. It was August 17th, 1985,
Wow.
when my nightmare began, right? And that's really what I call it. It was like an extended, prolonged nightmare. that really took a toll on me. And I'm surprised I look as young as I do because of the stress and everything that I had to really go through. But I look at that again as part of my contract for this earth, where I had to learn lessons in life in order for me to be able to empathize with other people and to understand where they're coming from. But at the time, I didn't, know that. I didn't understand it. I just thought that I got, the short straw, and that was really it. And really surprised I didn't become a drug addict or ended up on the streets as an alcoholic or whatever the case may be. But anyways, August 17th, when I landed in Edmonton, Alberta, it was by, I would say, a week or so later, week and a half later, that my dad first became mentally abusive with me, right? Started saying that maybe he should have left me in Canada and that it's really stressful. And especially during that time when there was a recession going on here in North America, and inflation was very high. I think at that time, inflation was just coming down, and there was no jobs. My dad had lost his business. He had a import-export business where he made a lot of money, and suddenly he lost all that money. So he went from operating this corporation, this company, to ended up driving a cab. And so now I could imagine that his ego was seriously damaged from going from this corporation type of environment to becoming a cabbie and taking $5 tips and things like that. So imagine that stress took its toll on him, and he was working, like 16, 17 hours a day, because I would remember he would drive up, I would see him, and he would come in, he would lay down on the couch, and he'd sleep for maybe a half hour, 45 minutes, and his radio would go off, and he'd run back out to the car, and he'd go and take his trip and, do what he needed to do to support the family. Right, but then it was beginning of September that the physical abuse began, and then at that time I didn't speak any English either. I spoke Danish, and I spoke Urdu and Hindi and Punjabi and Arabic, a little bit of German, because German and Danish are kind of the similar language. I was speaking Swedish and Norwegian, so I was pretty well versed in languages, and I still am. I'm still multilingual. So when I was, put into school, the stress of school began to accumulate because I didn't understand what was going on. And especially in those times, there was no ESL courses, there was no English as a second language. It was on your own, you have to do it on your own. And that was really it. Right. So the pressure from that, really began to accumulate on myself. And then as I started to bring home the report cards were bad. They had F's on them, right? Because I just simply didn't understand what was being said that I can, write down on paper. And then my dad, the only way that he could respond to that was through violence and through abuse.
Right, right.
So anyways, about a year later, I went to school, and, I had bruises and such. And one of the teachers had noticed, so they called child services. And child services stepped in at that time, and I was about 11 at the time, and then I was removed from the home, and then once I was removed from the home, I was put into foster care. And in the beginning, the government had temporary custody of me, and then about 6 months later, we went to court, and my dad gave up the entire custody of me to the provincial government of Canada. And then after that, I don't remember seeing my father until I was probably about 16 or 17. So there was that 5-6 year period, that gap, where I was institutionalized. I actually went from a foster home to a group home to this institution called Yellowhead Youth Center, which was for troubled youth. But I wasn't a troubled youth, I was an abused youth. Right. So they took an abused youth and put them into this, facility where you had troubled kids that were committing crimes. And, I had some really serious issues where, girls that were, 12, 13 years old were, working as prostitutes, and they were picked up off the streets and brought into these facilities. But anyways, I ended up spending, an extended period of time in that institution. And And then I didn't see my dad for about 5 or 6 years after that. And then when I did see him, that was going to court. And that was so that the government could renew the permanent guardian ownership. So he went there and he signed off on it. And I was sitting there and he didn't acknowledge me, didn't look at me, he didn't say anything to me, asked me how I was doing. And during that time, I was always asking my social workers that, is it necessary for me to be here? Why not, put me on a plane and send me back to Denmark?
Right.
And they were like, no, they can't do that because I'm the, permanent guardian of the government, and the government doesn't do that, things like that. So I actually ended up just, being stuck in this facility. So as we move forward, when I turned 18, from 11 to 18, I really had no guidance in my life, right? It was just the staff that worked at the institutions. I was running around with kids that had no guidance themselves. They had, really no parents, and staff were the only ones that were there. And of course, staff really don't care, right? They're just simply there for the check. Some of them may have cared, but majority of them, it was just, they're there to make a check and off they go, because it was more like a jail type of facility, right? Where it was locked down. You couldn't leave the institution. You had to ask. And then they had like these programs, right? Where, you're trustworthy, and then you're responsible, and you're independent. And then depending on those 3 levels, which gave you a little bit of freedom. So say if you were trustworthy, they gave you a 15-minute walk by yourself off of the institution. And then you had to be back. But if you were late, that would be taken away from you. So you had to work towards becoming independent. And then once you became independent, then they allowed you to go out for like 3 hours and to come back. So that kind of is the environment that I spent my youth in. So when I turned 18, on March the 30th, what was it, like 1993 or 92, something like that, can't really quite recall. But, suddenly, I had nowhere to go. The government was like, okay, well, you're 18 now, you're an adult, and we don't have to look after you anymore. And the government kind of just essentially kicked me out. And so there I was, without any guidance, without any family here in Canada, without any, contact with my family in Denmark, because I hadn't spoken to them since I was 11 years old. And all along this entire time, my father was telling my family in Denmark that I was fine, and that I was in a private school, and that
Oh
I
my
was,
God. How
that I was just doing fine, and that reason why there was no contact from me is because I was busy in my studies becoming a lawyer, and which in fact was not true.
Oh my gosh.
So when I was released when I was 18, of course I had nowhere to go. So I ended up on the streets in Edmonton, and I got into crime, and I started to commit crimes, and I started breaking into places. And that was more, not to make profit, but it was more out of survival.
Yeah.
Right? Because I needed food, I needed clothes, I needed things like that. So I began breaking into businesses and just doing stupid things. And then eventually I got into drugs, and I began selling drugs, and and then I got into selling guns, things like that. And then eventually I got arrested, and then I went to court, and then I got convicted, and ended up getting a few years in jail. And so I went to prison, and I sat there for about 3.5 years, and finally I was paroled. But I would say that 3.5 years was probably the best time spent for myself, because it gave me, allowed me time to go within internally, and to really fundamentally understand who and what I am, and what am I doing here? What is the purpose of me being here when I had a perfectly normal childhood, and then all that being blown up on me, and then being brought here to Canada, and then being abandoned, and then now being sitting in prison. Now, throughout that entire time, Kathy, I would have to say that I've spoken to my mother once in my lifetime. And that one time actually was when I was living in New York. And this was in the late 90s, because after I got released from prison, I took off. I didn't want to be in Canada anymore. So I bailed, and I went to Spain. And then from Spain, I took the Eurorail up to to Amsterdam, and then I ended up spending a few months in Amsterdam, and then from there I went to Denmark, and then I spent a good 6 months in Denmark with my family, and I explained to them exactly what had happened,
Wow.
and they were bewildered. They were like, "Oh my God, we thought that you were actually in school, in a private school, becoming a lawyer. That's why we hadn't heard from you." But then they understood what had happened. So now there's a fallout between the brothers. But anyways, after spending 6 months in Denmark, even when I was in Denmark with my family, I just didn't feel comfortable with them anymore, right? It's just they were strangers to me, and
Right.
being in their home, even though I remembered the home, even though I was still back in my old bedroom that I had as a child, I still didn't feel comfortable there. I felt like I was being what's that word I'm looking for? A burden, right? Someone that just showed up out of nowhere. Now I'm staying in their home, eating their food, using their electricity, things like that. So I had this, flawed thinking in my mind. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going back to Canada because I'm being called. I need to go. So I left Denmark, and I flew down to Amsterdam. And then again, I ended up spending another 3 months in Amsterdam because weed in Amsterdam at that time was legal.
Right.
And back in those days, I was like a really big pothead. So for me, that was more so escaping my reality as well, where I just wanted to stay high and not really address anything. So after 3 months, my visa ran out in Amsterdam, and I thought about going to Belgium, and then from Belgium, spending 24 hours in Belgium and then coming back into Netherlands to get another 3 months visa. So I didn't have to pay for any visas. And I was planning on doing that. But then I thought, no, I'm just going to fly back to Canada and go to Vancouver and see what I can do. But then, as I was flying, I landed in Montreal, and instead of staying on the plane in Montreal and heading to Vancouver, I got off the plane in Montreal and booked another flight to New York. And so I landed at Kennedy Airport. And then from there, I hooked up with my cousin because I was told that he lives there. So I was like, okay, well, I'll go spend some time in the States because I didn't want to be in Canada because
Right.
Canada just didn't have a very good experience here. So I ended up spending 18 months in New York, and it was during that time that I began an illegal business, I should say, because I started to run out of money, right? And I was asking my cousin, I was like, hey, I got to make some money. What can I do? I need to make some money. And then he had a Subway, right? And he's like, well, you can work at my Subway. I was like, no, no, no. I said, I'm not going to work at your Subway for $7 an hour. That's not my cup of tea. And he's like, well, why don't you drive a yellow cab? Right? He goes, I can rent you one. It's like $250 a week, and you can just drive around and make money and explore New York. I was like, hey, that's a wonderful idea. So the next day we went to a depot and rented a cab. And oddly enough, the cab number was 111. And yeah, I think back on it now and I find it quite interesting. So I got my cab, and I began sitting in front of the Port Authority station. And so people would come out of the Port Authority, they'd jump in my cab, and they always just want to go like 10, 15, 20 blocks. So it wasn't really a big deal. So I'd go and I'd drop them off and I'd come back. And one day I was sitting there and I was watching these people hovering around the telephone. And I was wondering to myself, what are they doing there? Right. And then they're holding on to like these little cards. And so I got out of my cab, I went over there and I kind of hung around smoking a cigarette and started talking to them. And they began telling me about their telephone cards. And I was like, how interesting. That's really cool. So I went, sat back in my car and I thought about it for a few weeks. And finally I come up with this idea. I was like, well, why don't I develop my own phone cards? And this way I don't have to drive a cab, and I can have this little business and I'm self-sufficient. So I drove to Detroit and had a meeting with MCI, and I ended up buying like 1,000,000 minutes from them, and hired a computer programmer from Long Island and had him program. His name was Roger, and got him to program increments of these minutes. And so I ended up putting all these cards together, and I started going from shop to shop to shop in Manhattan and up in Albany and Troy and Rochester. And And I started putting them on consignment, and I told them I'd give them 5 extra%. So if my competitor was giving them 20% discount, I would give them 25% discount, 30% discount, because I was buying minutes, for like pennies.
Right,
And
right.
so for me, it wasn't about greed. It was just so that I can keep myself sustained, and that I didn't have to, do anything stupid, especially in America, because I understood what America was about. And to get caught doing something dumb in America, I'd be in prison for the rest of my life. So I was like, no, 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 that's not happening to me.
Yeah.
So anyways, I did that, and it turned out that my business became very successful, and I started to sell a lot of cards, and I was making, trips often to Detroit to buy minutes. And instead of buying like 1 million minutes, I began buying 2 million and 3 million.
Wow.
And so I made enough money that one day, I was just sitting there, and this something dawned on me. I was like, I should look for my mother and speak with my mother, because I've never spoken with my mother ever before. So I hired a private investigator in Canada, out of Toronto, just actually outside of Toronto, just a little town called Toronto, right? Toronto is where my family comes from in Ontario. So I hired this guy, and it took him a few months to track my mother down, and he did track her down. She was living in a different province in a little island called Prince Edward Island. And gave me her address, her phone number, and all of that. And then I called her, but it wasn't her that I actually spoke to. It was my sister, and she actually had no idea that I'd existed, and I had no idea that she had existed, because my
Wow.
mother had never talked about me ever. So she's like, who are you? And I kind of explained to her who I am. And she's like, oh my God, right? She's like, I've had a brother and I've never known all this time. My mom's never spoken about you and things like that. And I said, okay, well, when is she going to be home anyways? I want to speak with her. I'm not really interested in speaking with you. And then she's like, oh, okay. And she's like, well, she'll be home at a particular time. So I waited and I called at that time. And then when I spoke with her, she was cordial for, the first 2 or 3 minutes. And then after that, she's like, okay, well, I have company, and, I can't speak with you. So it was nice chatting. And, please don't call back again. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was pretty heartbreaking as well at the
Wow.
time. And I was like, okay, no problem. So I hung up, and I haven't spoken to her since that time, just to respect her wishes. But again, this comes back to the contract that I was talking about earlier with the genetic memory and the people that we choose to be born to, right? So my idea behind it is, there's a number of things that are happening here. One is that I believe that I chose these people so that I can carry the genetic memory, so that I can do shadow work, so that I can begin to heal the entirety of the bloodline, and the Aboriginal trauma that can be healed, and perhaps the internal ancestral wisdom and that the Aboriginals carry was part of the plan that I needed to have in order to be here. So I don't really, I'm not very sad about it, because I see it as as a fact that I've been told that I've never incarnated on this world before, that this is my first visit here. And that makes sense to me, because me coming here and then not having any biological children of my own is because I've chosen not to have like a genetic anchor, or like a soul anchor connected to this planet. Because if I have that genetic anchor to this world, I may have to incarnate again and then to come back. But if I have no genetic ties or a genetic anchor to this planet, then I can just move forward with my journey and not have to come back here. So I'm pretty comfortable with that, perception of what's happened. So, to get on to theme of love, as you can tell, I didn't experience any of that really from the time I was 11 until about 32 years old, 33 years old. So, that's a period of good 21, 22 years where I was really trapped in density, in a very dense energy, very hateful, very angry, really didn't like people all that much. And even up until recently, I've said, I don't like people. I don't want to have anything to do with people. I would just rather, just leave me alone, it's been my thought. But things changed for me when I met my wife, Amy, in 2008. I was about 32, 33 years old, and then when we met, I fell in love with her immediately, and she fell in love with me, and then I began to experience that love once again in my life that I'd been missing, for a very long time, and it's still very difficult for me to accept. It still is to this day, because I'm still on guard, right? Because I'm not really quite sure as to what is going to happen, because I have this flawed thinking in my mind. Now I don't know if it's because of my experiences or it's because I've seen what I've seen. But I do have this flawed thinking in my mind, which I'm always battling. I'm always constantly fighting this idea in my mind. Anyways, I'll come back to that in a few minutes. So when I began to experience love, because I went into the relationship with 3 children, right? Very young children, right? Her oldest was 14, I believe, 13, something like that. And, her daughter was, I believe, like 10. And the youngest, Melvin, was about 5. And Melvin and I resonated very quickly because, he was so young, and, Shania and Quinn, not so much because, one, the age, and plus my flawed thinking, it didn't pan out very well for me anyways. And so when I got into this and I began experiencing this love, came with a lot of stress as well, right? Because I just didn't know what to expect, because, this was something, alien to me. It was very new. And even though I'd experienced it before, but it was a distant memory for me. And I was more stuck in melancholy than anything else, right? And I'm surprised I actually didn't die from that, because melancholy can do that to you, that extreme sadness of an individual where you don't have love, where you don't have that interaction, and that you can actually physically die. And it's been known to happen on many occasions. It's happened. So anyways, as I became more comfortable in my relationship with her, she began to share her experiences with me. And, and her experiences, were of ET abductions and missing times, and these gray beings, these tall ones and short ones, and, just doing things to her. And I became interested in that. I was like, how interesting. So this one day we were sitting at home, and the show Ancient Aliens came on, and I was in the bedroom doing something, and Amy came into the bedroom. She's like, hey babe, you got to come and watch this show. This is really cool. You'll dig this. Right. And prior to that, I was like, aliens, I don't really care, because how is an alien going to help me, in my personal life? It doesn't matter to me whether they traveled 100 light years or 2 light years, because if they can't help me personally, I don't care. Right. So reluctantly, I went and sat down and started watching the show, and I liked it. I was like, wow, this is really cool. And then we continued to watch. And then as I listened to more Ancient Aliens, I would listen to more of Amy's experiences. And I was like, something's not right here. Something's rotten in Denmark. And, so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start a podcast, and I'm going to talk to researchers and authors that talk about alien abductions and ETs and UFOs and such. Excuse me. So I began my Watchers Talk today, 9 years ago. June 22nd is the Watchers Talk birthday, which happens to be today.
Whoops.
And
happens to be here. Sorry, I didn't mean to take you off.
Wow,
it really is the birthday?
Yeah. Today is Watchers Talk's 9th birthday. So we've completed 8 seasons now, and we're going into our 9th season.
Wow.
And so I began exploring this whole alien abduction and began talking to people. And, if you go to my channel, Watchers Talk on YouTube, you'll see that some of my earlier shows, they're all about aliens, ET, UFOs, that's really all it is. And after a while, I got a grip on what was going on with Amy. And so Amy and I talked, and I explained to her, and still we're trying to figure out today exactly what's going on, because, she still continues to have those experiences today, not physically, but more conscious experience than anything else. And then after that, I was like, okay, I've learned enough about ET and aliens and such, and I understand what they're doing and what they're about, and good for them that they're coming here to help humanity ascend, because I didn't know anything about this ascension stuff, because I was, really, I was, blue pilled, right? Where, not so much blue pilled where I believed the government because I had a bad experience with the government to begin with. So I just, it was a different type of blue pill where, I didn't believe everything I heard, but the things that I was reading in school and history and things like that, I believed. I was like, that must be.
Yeah.
Then I got into archaeology and I wanted to understand our deep past and pyramids and things like that. So I got into that. And then about, I would say about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I got into consciousness and I wanted to understand consciousness. And really that's been my focus for the last 4 years. But now the thing that I've discovered about consciousness is that consciousness is love. That is source love. Every single one of us is connected to that source love because we're an antenna, and that antenna, is connected like a non-local, consortium of minds, hive minds that may be splintered, fractured, whatever people want to call it. It's just that, that consciousness that that I've been exploring, and I've learned that it's all about love. When we look at the coreness of this planet, it's love. When we look at the animal kingdom, it's love. Yesterday, I saw, a video of two crabs, and these crabs were like about this big, each of them. And this guy walked up to the beach, looked at one crab, and he went to go poke at the crab. And the other crab came along, walked up and covered the other crabs so that it wouldn't get harmed. And that moves me because I see that even within the life that we don't see as sentient, right, and that even within that sentient life, love is the fundamental thing that's encoded within them. And so is the same within the human body with this avatar. Love is the core thing, because without love, we, will die, right? As I was explaining earlier with the melancholy, if you don't have it, you will die. If you don't have love, you become a drug addict. If you don't have love, you become an alcoholic. If you don't have love, you can become homeless. If you don't have love, you can become extremely violent. If you don't have experience with love, you can become an abuser, right? So there's a fallout of not being involved with this 5 to 8 energy, because it's what it is. It's the core fundamental thing of all things that exists. It's the default program of all that there is. Now, when we look at love, I was a pretty sad person, a very angry person when I met Amy. And when together, now we've been together for like 14 years, 15 years. And I can tell that mentally I'm a different person than I was 14, 15 years ago. Now, when we look around and we see the power of love, I like to look at like nursing homes and, animal therapy and old folks homes and hospitals and such, where, people bring in dogs and cats and horses and turtles and just, it doesn't matter what type of an animal it is. As soon as you bring that animal into a facility, everyone begins to brighten up, their mood changes, their sadness goes away, and that animal really brings that unconditional love to the individual or to the entire community, and it helps them, health-wise. It's beneficial for them. And as soon as that animal disappears, a couple of days later, they're right back to the same, state of mind, where they're sad and they miss their families and whatever the case may be. It continues to happen until the animal comes back, and then same thing, and on and on and on. Now, another example of the power of love is what we need to understand is that we are a mini ocean here on this planet. 70% of our body is made of water. Now, that's what the science likes to tell us, 70% of our body is made of water. But, if we fundamentally really look at our avatar, it's actually 100% water, right? It's just formatted in a different way. Now, when we look at Dr. Emoto, rest in peace, that man, he showed us the power of love when it comes to water, when it comes to other things as well. You can, give an intention to water and say, I love you, I appreciate you, thank you very much for sustaining me and giving me this life-giving liquid that can save my life. And then you put that in the freezer and you come out and then it's perfect. It's not foggy, it's perfectly clear water. Now, when we do that to, say, an ice cube or to an ice tray, we do the same thing to ourselves. Now, I say to myself when I walk into the bathroom in the morning, I look at myself, I say, I love you. And that's all I have to say is I just look at myself and I say, I love you. And then that begins to change the water within my body. It goes from being defragmented to into, being perfect little crystals, and it begins to heal the body as well. Now, this intention of love, it not only follows through with water, but it follows into food as well. I'm sure you've seen many videos on the internet where people have taken, two Tupperware things of rice, and one thing of rice, they just don't say anything and put it in the fridge. But the other Tupperware can of rice, they say, I love you, I appreciate you, thank you very much for sustaining me. And you can put that into the fridge as well. The rice that you didn't have any intention towards will mold and it'll go rotten within days, but the rice that you gave your intention to will will remain edible for days and days and days afterwards. So if we can do that to water and to food, then we can do that to ourselves as well. But not only can we do that to ourselves as well, but you can do that to other people as well, because the love frequency, because when you say I love you, you're actually speaking at the 528 frequency, right? The frequency of birds and nature and, grounding and earthing. You're speaking in that language. So when I look at my wife and I say, I love you, I love you, I love you all day long, I tell her like, 20 times a day, hey baby, why are you so gorgeous? I love you. You're so amazing. I love you. I love you. I love you. There's a point behind that. The point is that one, yes, I love my wife, endlessly, but on the other hand, I understand the power of my words. And then when I'm giving her this power, this, energy of mine, 528, I'm healing her as well, as long as my intentions are well. Right. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Right. But, it's up to the individual if they want to accept that. Right. So that's kind of, where I stand, my experience with love. Now, as I was saying earlier, my flawed thinking in love is I don't feel, okay, I'll put it in different words. I feel that in the times that we live in today, right, a lot of us may be genuine in loving ourselves, loving our partners, loving our family, loving the environment, loving the earth, and having that unconditional love towards one another. But I find that in this day and age that we live in, that people are misusing love. They're lying to themselves and they're lying to other people, because once you're involved in unconditional love, right, people will make mistakes in their lifetimes, and those things will happen. Whether a person meant to do it or they didn't mean to do it, whether they fell off the wagon or if they were forced into it, it doesn't matter. People make mistakes in life. Now, the reason why I say that, some people are involved with fake love is, I use an example of a couple, right? Let's say, you're a man and a woman, you've been involved in a relationship, and say you've been together, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and one of them has an affair. Now, as hurtful that is, the betrayal of that, as hurtful that is, what happens in our day and age is that the love that they had for that person yesterday, that unconditional love, which they said that they had, today is suddenly gone, right? Now, today they hate them. I deplore you. I don't like you. I hate you. How could you have done this to me? Fuck off, just beat. I want to have nothing to do with you. Now, in my mind, what that tells me is that that love wasn't unconditional to begin with. That was a conditional love. Because you made a mistake, now you have to pay the price. Now you have to be punished. Now this person suddenly doesn't love you anymore. So now when you go into your next relationship, you're going to carry that energetic burden with you in your mind. Now, instead of going for, therapy, and instead of trying to work things out and say, okay, well, we've got 20 years invested within us. I made a mistake or you made a mistake. Things happened, it's okay. It happens. How can we move beyond that? How can we move forward beyond this hurdle to make sure that this never happens again? But in our time and age, in this day today, you grab the suitcases and out the window they go, and that's it. I hate you, filing for divorce, and that's it. And to me, in my mind, that tells me that this person never had love for you to begin with. It was a fake love. It was a love to make themselves feel better so that they didn't feel alone. Because if it was unconditional love, no matter what happens in a relationship, the two people that are actually in love with one another will try to work things out. Now, the affair shouldn't have happened to begin with, right? But that's the fallacy of a human being, because a human beings will make mistakes. People will get trapped in honey traps. People will get conned into doing things. People may con themselves into doing things and, just make a mistake, right? Is what I'm trying to say. But once that mistake is made, it has to be worked with. It has to be, fundamentally addressed, right? Not throw your partner out the window or throw them under the bus. And, especially if you're involved in a relationship, that has, let's say, stepchildren involved, and you've raised those stepchildren, and now all of a sudden, because that person cheated on you, now you hate them all and you're out of there and you're never going to speak to them again. Now, I would have to ask, was that pure love or was that fake love? Right? So we have to be very careful, is what my point is, that we have to be very, very careful when we, involve ourselves in relationships with people, that the love that we're expressing is actually a genuine love, not the, love that, because you're missing something out of your life and because you're trying to make yourself feel a little bit better because of whatever particular reason, you say, okay, well, I love you, but this love comes with these conditions, right? But love doesn't come with conditions. God loves you, right? But has God given you conditions, right? Has God said, Kathy, if you drink beer, I'm not going to love you anymore. Kathy, if you meditate 5 times a day, I'm just not going to love you anymore. It doesn't come with that, does it? A parent doesn't give their child conditions of love, do they? They say, that's my child. I love you unconditionally. Whether you're a murderer, whether you're a rapist, whether you're a Hitler, a Stalin, it doesn't matter how nasty of a person you are, a parent is still going to have that unconditional love for their child. And when we go into a relationship with someone, that's how it should be, right? Because the only way to experience love is by simply giving pure love, and not fake love. Like when we look at our cats, like my cat Daisy, that is unconditional love, right? She doesn't say, okay, well, I'm only going to love you as long as you give me food, right?
Although it does help.
It definitely does help. Yeah.
Oh, geez. Oh, well, I think what you're saying is a higher level of consciousness. What you're talking about is you're talking about somebody really looking at the decisions that they make and see how they can express love in every way, releasing labels and judgment. Because so much of what you're talking about, even from your background, I mean, you went through a lot. And a lot of that is conditioned. It was part of the programming, your father's programming, your aunt and uncle's programming. I mean, think of all of that. And once you wake up to seeing that that's a program and that your soul wanted you to have those experiences so you could be who you are right now. And you're really, you guys, if you get to experience Watchers Talk, you will see Omar is one of the best researchers and explorers into this time, and has connected with some of the most amazing international experts in the field of paranormal, archaeology, ufology, all of the things where he is learning, and you can tell he's learning. He's not showing up trying to banter. These are dialogues, right? Right, Omar? I
Yeah,
mean, you're showing up as love. That's why I was so attracted. It was like, I don't know anything. I didn't know anything about you. And it was like, I'm in. I can feel the vibe. I'm here. And I don't know what I did. I think I brought like 12 people again to your thing, or maybe more. I don't even know.
More than that, Kathy. I think you got like 30 people.
I know, but I could feel it. I could feel it that, hey, this is the love wave. This is what we're doing right here with World Unity Week. We are creating this opportunity for people to enlighten their mind and their spirit with a can-do expression, because everything else outside is oppressive, it's chaotic, it's controlling. This is like, hey, no, I came here to play this game, not to just watch it or be victimized by it, right?
Yeah, my hope is with every single one of my streams is I would say the core thing for myself is that I hope that after listening to my stream, yeah, because I don't like to add my own 2 cents into my speaker. I just like to ask a question and then just ask follow-up questions on what they're saying. And I really don't want to add any of my own input to that, because I want to try to understand my speaker. And my hope is that after the event or after the interview or after our talk is done, that people, learn to shed their identities, right? Because it's the identities that we put on ourselves, these jackets that we put on, that really, really give us the flaw as the human being that we are, because these identities that we can put on cause us to hate. These identities cause us to create division amongst ourselves. So if we can shed these identities and identify as the whole instead of, particular aspects, then I think that we will begin to understand ourselves in a much deeper way, because the more you understand yourself, right, the more you understand what's around you and what's happening around you, and you can interpret what's happening around you a little bit differently, a little bit better, more out of empathy and compassion. But in my mind, empathy and compassion can only go so far, right? Because again, as I was saying earlier, we live in a type of world where people will want to take advantage, constant advantage of an individual, right? And so for me, that's predatory behavior.
Right.
And if we, go within ourselves and begin to understand ourselves, then we can begin to highlight and understand what we're dealing with and what we're interacting with, what's real love, what's fake love, right? What's predatory and what's not. And then we can, really digest it from that aspect. What I do, Kathy, is that I have this thing, I call it the Trinity. And my Trinity is that I take my thoughts and I align and I center my thoughts, because our thoughts are never going to disappear. Our thoughts are constantly there. It's taken, hundreds of millions of years for this human body to develop to where it's at today. And for it to ask, for us to ask for our mind to stop working, it's just not possible, because this machine, this is how it works. So what I do is I take my thoughts and I place my thoughts to one side. And then I breathe. And then once I begin breathing and my thoughts, my mind thoughts are, kind of compartmentalized and put aside, then I begin to align my rainbow body. And then once I begin to align my rainbow body, then I begin to align my running thoughts that I've compartmentalized, and I bring those together. Oh. Now, once I bring that together, then what happens is that then I begin to bring my avatar into line with that line of compartmentalized thought and the rainbow body. And I do that through
That's a
zoning.
beautiful strategy. And I'm sorry, we need to conclude, but I want to give you, Kathy and Omar, this has been fascinating. Just a 1 30-second max conclusion, final word here for our guest.
I love you.
I love you, Omar. And
I love
I'm
you,
so
and
glad you're in my life.
thank you. And me too, Kathy. I'm glad you're
Yeah.
in my life. And, I love you, and I love the earth. It's been a wonderful experience here. I hope it lasts a little bit longer. And, just my thought would be is to accept everyone for who and what they are, and give that unconditional love, but don't allow someone to step on you as you're giving that love, because as you're giving it, some people will try to take advantage of that, and understand that. And once you understand that, then you can learn how to give that love to that particular individual. It's not that you just cut yourself off and don't give them love at all. Then you have to actually give them some tough love, right? There's a soft love and tough love. So, my conclusion would be that is to just, be aware, okay? Don't stop loving. And
Perfect advice, perfect conclusion.
And the
Omar.
best way to reach you, I did put it in the chat, was a projectionofyou.com is
Yeah.
Omar's website. And then on YouTube, he's on Watchers Talk.
Yeah, you can really, those are the only places where I am active. I don't do really, I do some stuff on Facebook, but it's just mostly memes and stuff. But if you want to find some
Okay.
serious work of mine, you can find me at Watchers Talk on YouTube. And of course, my website, projectionofyou.com. And then through my YouTube channel, you can get my Telegram chat room and things like that, where I'm pretty active and discussing
Awesome.
and sharing things.
Thank you,
So,
Omar. Thank you,
very
Kathy.
much. I so appreciate you guys.
And Kathy, you'll have to bring Omar to a Thursday night CCC.
Yeah. Oh,
At
yeah.
90 minutes at that time. So
Yeah.
that'd be
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, yeah, you'll see more of Omar.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noel. Thank you very much. Thank you for putting this together. I appreciate your work, and I realize this is very hard work. I'm a veteran of it myself, so kudos to you, and I so appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the speakers today. So thank you, Kathy. Wonderful, wonderful job.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.